enjoying this summer-like weather and all the leaves just raining down. I don't have enough trash cans anymore to fill up all the leaves. They just get filled up as fast as I can. I get that rake out.
And we're supporting Lowe's by buying bags.
Yeah, I blow the driveway off one morning, and that afternoon it looks like I hadn't touched it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can relate to that. Well, folks, it's that time. So thank you for everyone that is joining us today. I'm sure we'll be having others, but it is time to call this oldest Lions Club group to order. And we will begin with our procedures, reminders. And our host today is Chuck Mandelbaum. So Chuck, if you will, please remind us what we're supposed to be remembering.
I ask that you, when you're not speaking, that you mute yourself and that only one person speak at a time. And that if you have some radio or something going on in the background, please either shut it off or mute yourself. Okay. Any background noise. That's it.
All right, thank you, Chuck. Okay, let's proceed then with our Pledge of Allegiance and pledge to the Texas flag. So as you're able, would you please stand? And today, Sandy Mann will be leading us in our pledge. So let me get myself standing up. And Sandy, when you're ready.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation,
indivisible.
Under the Texas flag, pledge allegiance to the flag, one state under God,
One and indivisible.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw.
All right, all those with a yeehaw, sounding good today. All right, well, welcome to everyone again to our meeting. I'm Rudy Munguia, the president for the Lions Club, the Austin Founder Austin Founder Lions Club. And let's see what announcements we might have today. Well, before we get into the announcements, let me ask if we have any guests that we want to recognize. I'm not seeing any hands up just yet. Maybe others might be joining us. And so let me then proceed with announcements. Okay, a reminder. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes. I just saw them, Susie and Kit Gallagher. They're guests here again.
Oh,
So
yes,
glad
yes.
you came. And Kit is a photographer. Susie is a singer. And it's great that you're both here today. Nice to see you.
All right, thank you for that reminder, and welcome to Susie and Kit. Always happy to have you here. And so any other, all right. Okay, then for announcements, let me bring this up about Blue Santa. Blue Santa is our Lions Club's way of helping the community for providing food and toys. It's a food and toys drive to help the Austin Police Department Blue Santa operations with helping those that are in need. Our plan or our pledge is for $750. The overall goal is $500,000. That's not our part, but our part is $750. So if you plan to contribute or donate, would you do that sometime this week? There is a deadline on that. I believe it's December the 1st. So you can do so by going to our website, or you can send a check to our mailing address. And so I would just call that to everyone's attention. Those that are able, yes, JP?
Do we have a current status of where we stand on that goal?
Yes, an estimate. We are approaching the halfway mark. So again, our part as our Lions Club is $750. We may be at around $300. So we're hoping that we might have others that are planning to do so to take care of that, and so that we can do our share in helping those that are in need here in the community. Thank you, JP. Yes.
We can send that to Jim Roberson or to you, or?
Yes, you
What's the
can.
best way?
You can send it to Jim Roberson at our address, at our Lions Club address, and make it out to the Austin Founder Lions Activity Fund. And on the memo line on your check, if that's how you want to do it, just write Blue Santa. And I see Jim's on the screen. Jim, is that going to cover it? All right, let's get a thumbs up.
We have 21 on the call today, which is about a fourth of our membership. Would it be worthwhile for someone to issue a broadcast email to the rest of the members so they're aware of what we're doing?
Yes, we thank you for that. I am preparing something to go out either later today or tomorrow in the form of a Austin Founder Lions news that will have several items on it. And the main item, the first item will be the Blue Santa, which will include information for getting onto the website or an address where to send a check. So thank you, JP. Yeah, this is important. So let me, so be on the lookout for that email. It should come in later today or tomorrow. All right, here's some good news about our Rose Day tally. We know that we had a successful, or we've been reporting that we had a successful Rose Day, and so the net profit, net gain was $4,971, 4971. So congratulations to everybody for making this success and helping us with this successful fundraiser. A couple of other announcements. There will be a board of directors meeting following today's meeting. That'll be at 1:45. And just call attention to something coming up in December. We're having our holiday party on December the 17th. That will be our last meeting of the year. So December 17th, we will be having our holiday party, and you will be receiving something about email concerning the holiday party. It will be a 2-hour, not meeting, but a 2-hour gathering, starting at 12 o'clock and going to 2 o'clock. And Mac Ragsdale and his program committee has done a wonderful job in putting this together. It will involve a lot of virtual socializing, if there is such a thing, and it will involve options on goodies to eat, a beverage of your choice, and et cetera, But again, more information is coming your way. Mac, I see you on the screen. Do you want to add anything else so that we can know about December 17th?
Well, there will be a lot of detail coming out on it, but basically it's a wine, cheese, and chocolate tasting, and afterwards we're going to have some holiday memories, so stories from the Lions. And I wanted to credit Ann Ward with doing the heavy lifting on it. Really, she did all the research and set it all up with Antonelli's Cheese Shop. And so I don't know if you want to add anything, Ann.
All right. Okay. Well, just that was just kind of as a warm up, but there will be more information coming to you by way of an email. And I think that's getting ready to go out again, either today or tomorrow. All right. Let me move on to birthdays, and always happy to announce our birthdays. Our birthday, let's see. Oh my goodness. We have, well, we mentioned last week, Beverly Weeks, November the 18th. So here we are, happy to wish Bev, or say a belated happy birthday to Bev. That was yesterday. Also yesterday, Wes Brayton had a birthday. And we are not meeting next week. So let me announce some birthdays that are taking place later this month. Our next meeting is in December. On December 3rd. So here are some November birthdays that we want to recognize. On November 25th, Craig Estes. On November 23rd, I almost missed it, Sandy. On November 23rd, Sandy Mann is having her birthday. Our pledge leader today is having her birthday on November 23rd. November 28th, Lions Clyde Sutton. And on November 30th, everyone's favorite guy, Ken Crone, is having a birthday, November 30th. So for those of you that are on today, happy birthday, and enjoy your special day.
My birthday
Okay.
is Sunday.
Did I miss anybody, or we're updating our birthday list, but did I miss anyone by chance?
My birthday was this week, Sunday.
Oh, Judy. Yeah, Judy. We did recognize your birthday last week, but again, happy to do so today. And so Judy Saul's birthday was this past Sunday, November the 15th. Thank
And
you.
Robert Watson's birthday is December the 1st. I don't think we'll have another meeting before then. December the 1st.
No, Robert Watson. That name sounds familiar. Yeah. Yeah. Happy birthday, Robert. Ahead of time. No, we will not meet until after December the 1st. So happy birthday to all our Lions that are having those special days during this time. All right. I believe we're ready to move on, and we're ready for our program and to introduce our speaker and our program. Patty, would you do the honors, please? Patty, we cannot hear you. No.
It's my honor to present Dr. Rowena Houghton Dasch. She's the director of the Neill-Cochran House Museum. She holds an MA and a PhD in American art from the University of Texas at Austin. Go Longhorns! And an AB in art and archaeology from Princeton University. During her tenure at the Neill-Cochran House Museum, Rowena has focused on increasing the diversity of the displays, mounting first ever curated exhibitions of paintings, installing a didactic display of silver working methods, and overseeing annual exhibits in the museum's new upstairs gallery. Her day-to-day work covers all facets of the museum's operations, the historic property preservation, including planning and implementation of a major structural restoration project. She also does annual fundraising and education programming for adults and families, and collection management. So I'm so proud that you're here joining us right from the Neill-Cochran house.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to have to admit that I'm not at the Neill-Cochran house. I'm actually on my screened-in porch. But that is the Neill-Cochran House Museum behind me. We're living in strange times. 10 minutes ago was making pasta for my daughter for lunch because she's still doing online school, and now here I am talking to you. So a little cognitive dissonance in I think all of our days these days. But I am so happy to be talking with you all today. And I hear you're the oldest continually operating Lions Club in the world. That for somebody who's a historian and historic preservationist, that means a lot. That's really cool. So thanks for having me. I am going to talk to you today about our history and connect that history to the city of Austin. And this graphic is one of my favorites that I have ever come up with in my tenure at the Neill-Cochran House Museum, because it really gives you a sense of the scope of Austin at the point in time when our site was completed. This is actually the 1883 bird's eye view map of Austin. So that would have been, 25 years after completion of our site, 1856. And you have the Capitol, which really was the fulcrum around which all of early Austin kind of functioned, except I say that, but while it was the defining point, it was also the north end of town for a very long time. And really, the vast majority of what was early Austin happened right along Congress Avenue and 6th Street. So if you think about that as the origin story for the place that we live today, what you're seeing on the outside, and I think probably y'all can see my cursor maybe since I'm sharing my screen, but I'm pointing my cursor on, so you've got Lamar, what would become ultimately in the 20th century Lamar Boulevard, but is the Shoal Creek watershed. And just to the right of that, there's a large rectangular 2-story building. And that is what is today the Neill-Cochran House Museum. So 1883, I'm sorry, the map's 1887. 1883 is when UT was established. So that's why that was in my head. In any case, 1887, you can see that the site remains relatively on its own. There's not a lot around us. And the only reason that what has become West Campus, which surrounds us today, developed was because of the creation of the university. And you can actually see a cluster of housing up close to Guadalupe Street, which is on the west side of Old Main with its large grounds around it. And so about 3 blocks in, you've got significant density just within 4 years of the establishment of the university. None of that was there prior to the university's establishment. So the reason that I've titled this From Spoke to Hub, Neill-Cochran House Museum and the Changing Face of Austin is because when our site was first developed, we really were a spoke. We were very much outside of town. Rural is maybe a stretch of a term, but just sort of rolling hillside behind us and prairie land in front of us. And today, and this is an image of the front of the house as it appears today. But today, if you look at the city of Austin, this is a Google map that I pulled, looks like 5 years ago, good Lord. So the amoeba that is Austin is even larger today. But where would you even look for us? I mean, so you've got Austin, and essentially we're right here. If you can see my cursor, just to the north side of the word Austin. So we like to joke that if you were to take a map of Austin and drop a Google map pin on the city, you might just accidentally hit us today. That's how central we are, and how much things have changed. So I imagine you all are all really very familiar with the history of the city of Austin. It was established in, just briefly, 1839. The reason Austin is where it is a combination of a feud between Mirabeau B. Lamar and Sam Houston, who hated one another. And Lamar wanted to get the capital away from Houston, the city of Houston, which was at the time kind of a swamp-filled cesspool of yellow fever and other atrocities. And I say that as a native Houstonian. I'm always amused to have to denigrate my hometown. But it is true that Houston was not the most sanitary of living conditions. But above and beyond that, Lamar wanted to establish an outpost on the frontier to disrupt the movements of the native peoples who were in this area and who were would move east to raid. And he was really trying to kind of create a western boundary to keep them out. And also he wanted to know when there was a possibility of Mexican uprising and invasion from the south. Mexico never officially recognized Texas, and Lamar would prove right that they would attempt to take it back. The Mexican army invaded Texas twice in 1842, and both times took San Antonio for several days. So Lamar's looking for places where he might be able to establish a frontier capital, and came out here, went through Bastrop, came west, stayed on the banks of the Colorado River, and went out hunting and killed a buffalo on what became Capitol Hill. And the story goes that after he killed the buffalo, he looked around and said, "This is where our new national capital will be." So we have Lamar and a dead buffalo to thank for our being here, but there was no reason for the establishment of this town. There were 4 families here. There was no agriculture, really. I mean, no one starved in Austin. There was plentiful game. You could grow crops, but this was not an area that lent itself to any natural industry. And one could argue, for those of you who have been in Austin for a good long while, that outside of the capital, so state business, and then ultimately the state university, there was not a lot of industry in Austin for a good long while into the 20th century as well. So that kind of makes a bit of sense. So this is a view of what it looked like in 1840. 1839, the town is established, built essentially from nothing. And one of the people who was here at that time of creation was this man, Abner Cook. He was a young man from originally Salisbury, North Carolina. He had been apprenticed to a carpenter and master builder in Salisbury. So he did that work from the age of 14 to 21. When he finished his indenture, he moved on to, I believe it was Macon, Georgia, and then to Nashville, Tennessee, spent a few years there. But by spring of 1839, he had come to Galveston, and that he was at the age of 25. He was not unusual. Many young men were coming to Texas during this time period. The country was in desperate need of people, in desperate need of taxes, and so people paying taxes. So they were welcoming pretty much any and all immigrants. He was trained, as I say, as a carpenter and master builder. He was not a trained architect. There were very few trained architects at that time outside of major metropolitan areas. And master builders, what they would do is they would work from pattern books. And so they had an understanding of the construction process. And from a decorative standpoint, they embraced styles based on pattern books. Abner Cook became very much connected with the Greek Revival style. But when he arrived in Austin, really what was being put up were log cabins. And so his first work, he built log cabins both for himself. He built the first Presbyterian, not first Presbyterian, but the first Presbyterian church in the city, which was itself a log cabin. And then as time passed and the city became more wealthy, more people were moving in, it seemed clear after 1845, it seemed clear that that Austin would be the capital for a good time to come. People started putting up more permanent homes. So Cook, as I say, became well known for working in the Greek Revival style, and he built a series of 13 homes. The oldest of them, 1847, 1848, that was the Watkins home. And I'm afraid I don't have an image to share with you. It's been torn down, but it was a kind of simple 1.5 story ranch style home, but he appended to the front of it a colonnade, 6-column colonnade in the Greek Revival style. So that was really where he began. And then he moved on to increasingly complex projects. The oldest of his homes, it's still standing, is on the Bremond block. And then you move into the later 1850s. So the governor's, what you're seeing here are the Neill-Cochran House Museum in the upper left, the governor's mansion to the right, Sweetbrush, bottom left, and Woodlawn, bottom right, also known as the Pease Mansion. Sweetbrush and Woodlawn were both 1853, 1854. And the governor's mansion and the Neill-Cochran house were 1855, 1856. And so you can see he kind of hit his stride and ended up really incorporating the same elements in much of his work. We have Doric columns instead of Ionic columns, which you see on most of his other buildings, partly because our structure was just seen to be a bit more, what's a good word for it? It was not quite as elegant and robust as some of his other work. It was done on more of a budget. Cook became known for incorporating this, it's either called an X and stick or sheaves of wheat motif on most of his structures. You can see our balcony there with our sheaves of wheat. If we go back to this image, you see the same thing on the balcony at Sweetbrush, balcony at Woodlawn, and then of course all the way across the balcony at the governor's mansion. Although that balcony is not original. Originally, it was set back from the columns, and it was an update in the 1890s, I think, that extended that balcony out to engage with the columns. So I've kind of already covered this, but this is the 1873 map. This is the earliest bird's eye view of Austin, and it gives you a better sense of how small the town was. So you have the original Capitol building there sort of anchoring the center of the screen. And then just not that many blocks long of 2-story structures clustered onto Congress Avenue. And then you have some buildings extending off to the left and the right, but not many. And most of what you're seeing, so you see these blocks all laid out, but the only thing that are on these blocks are trees. There were very few buildings north of the Capitol at that time. And then we jump forward to 1887, massive change in the population of the city, and part of that, and then the establishment of UT. One of the interesting things about this map, just as an aside, is that it shows the entirety of the UT main building, but that the east wing of Old Main was not completed until 2 years later. So the bird's eye map is actually showing something that is aspirational rather than actual at the time that it was created. You got to be these are really interesting maps, but you have to be very careful with them because, for instance, I'll go back. This version of this map is ugly. So if you look at where we are, the Neill-Cochran House Museum today, at this time in 1887, it would have been called the Neill Home. You notice that there is nothing around us. And I'm afraid I don't think I can blow this up, but if I could, you'd see that there is no walkway up to the building. There are no trees. There are no secondary structures on the property. None of those are shown. It's just sort of sitting out there blankly by itself, which these bird's eye view cartographers would do on purpose, because at a certain point you would end up with clutter if you included too much on any given piece of property. So they're a wonderful resource, but you have to be careful how how closely you look at them, because you're not necessarily, you might think that buildings that you had don't exist because they're not there, but it's simply that there was a decision made not to include them. So after the Civil War, and we'll go back to our site history in a second, but since we're still looking at this map, what you're seeing circled there is the Wheatville Freedmen community that was established just to the other side of 24th Street from what ultimately became the Neill-Cochran House Museum. It was one of 15 freedom communities that was established in Austin after the war. And it's significant in large part because of its association with a man named Jacob Fontaine. Fontaine was an enslaved man, actually enslaved by Edward Fontaine, who was the founder of St. David's Episcopal Church. And Jacob ended up, after the Civil War, becoming really the most prominent Black pastor for the city of Austin. He was involved in the founding of 7 different churches, including Sweet Home Missionary Baptist, which is still in Clarksville. And he also established a newspaper called the Gold Dollar, which was one of the first African-American newspapers west of the Mississippi. And it was the, it was designed as not as a way of sharing scripture. There's a lot of religious content to it, but it was also a way to connect families who had been separated by slavery. So many, if you can imagine how many people after the end of the war were trying to find family members who had been sold away at one time or another. And then on top of that, you have the war and the disruption and dislocation that it caused. So his newspaper was really significant from that standpoint, and it was published from a 2-story building, the only 2-story building on this block, which you can't really see very well in this image, but basically just across the street from our site. This is an image showing the laying of the cornerstone of Old Main at UT. And the reason it's here is, again, to give a sense of how far out of town we were. That is our structure. You can see the columns right there, and it is the only thing on the horizon line. So the establishment of the university really changed the face of what at that time was North Austin. And this is an image of the Fontaine Gold Dollar building. It, in recent years, was the home to Freedman's Barbecue, which you might be familiar with. It closed several years ago when a major construction project was about to begin. And it recently, they have completed that work. It has now been completely horseshoed in to student housing. And so the building is still there, but it is not accessible to the public. It's unclear what its future will be from that standpoint. The Travis County Historical Commission would not allow it to be removed, but they have not required any opportunity for public access, which is really unfortunate. This is the last building still standing in Wheatville. And so a significant part of our city's past that currently is not accessible to us very well. So this is an image to go back and talk a little bit about our site history. This is right around 1895, 1896. And one of the reasons I love this photograph is because of the dirt road. This intersection was not actually paved until 1931. Which to me seems just impossibly recently. The idea of Austin with unpaved roads just seems so alien. But the history of our site is that it was first commissioned from Abner Cook by a man named Washington Hill and his wife Mary. They were both 30 years old. They had a 1-year-old son. And Wash Hill, he was a mason. He was in the process of really trying to establish himself as someone of prominence in the city. He had just come to Austin in 1854. He, give me one second. Large piece of construction equipment driving by my house. It was loud. He worked as a land agent and surveyor, and he claimed some familiarity, some relationship to Lamar. And I think he thought that that was going to help him with commissions or contracts. And he certainly would not be the first Texan to think that nepotism was going to stand him in good stead. But in his case, it sounds like it didn't really pan out the way he expected it to. They took on this large project. It was 17.5 acres of land, this Greek Revival mansion designed by Austin's preeminent master builder. I mean, Abner Cook was the man to go to if you were building a fine home. And it became evident pretty quickly that they'd bitten off more than they could chew. They took on a couple of loans and they sold 5 enslaved people in order to finance their project. But ultimately, they ran out of money and were not able to move into the home. They sold it on completion to some real estate speculators named Swante Swinson and J.M. Swisher. And you may well be familiar with those names. They were very active in the antebellum period. And one of them, I want to say it was Swinson, was on the board of trustees for the Texas State School for the Blind, which had just recently been established by Governor Pease. And they were working on constructing their own building, their own home, which is known today as the Nov19 building. It's just to the north of the Irwin Center, and it's the headquarters for the Briscoe Center for American History. But at the time, that had not yet been completed, and they needed a place to be. So they rented this home. And so the first residents of our site were students and teachers for the Texas State School for the Blind. They were there several years. The lieutenant governor, a man named Fletcher Stockdale, lived in the home during the Civil War. He sort of got turfed out by the federal army at the end of the war, who requisitioned the site as a federal war hospital. George Armstrong Custer came to Austin in charge of the troops, the federal troops, and installed them in the Shoal Creek area just behind our site. And a combination of the proximity to the encampment with the fact that the site was really very remote, and probably because it was political retribution. Stockdale had actually become governor of Texas. Governor Pendleton Murrah, who was the governor, fled to Mexico at the end of the war. Apparently he was in poor health, and I don't know why he fled to Mexico, because he died either way. But in any case, he fled to Mexico. Stockdale became the governor. It was Stockdale who officially surrendered Texas to the federal troops. And so they took Stockdale's house and turned it into a hospital. They were there for a little over a year, did a lot of damage, and moved out. It took a bit of time to put the place back together again. It remained a rental. And then finally, in 1876, Andrew and Jenny Neill purchased it to live in the home with their 2 children. And interestingly enough, Andrew Neill's former mother-in-law. So Andrew Neill's first wife passed away from yellow fever in Galveston in 1867. And his mother-in-law had been living with them at the time, and so continued to live with him. And when they moved to Austin, he moved her along with his current wife and their children. So really kind of an interesting side look into the difference in understanding of family and obligation from the 19th century to today. They were there for a while. Andrew Neill died in 1883. He was older. He was born in 1804, I think it is, and so he was older than his wife and children. He no longer had political aspirations. He had run for lieutenant governor unsuccessfully in the 1850s, but he had a lot of money and he enjoyed kind of playing politician from the sidelines. So the home was a place that was filled with politicians during that time period. The Neills were known for entertaining. They were apparently known for the quality of their wine cellar. So this was a very elegant home at that time. Jenny Neill moved out, rented, and then ultimately sold the home to Thomas and Bessie Cochran in 1895. The Cochrans had moved in 1893. And so what you're seeing here are Mr. and Mrs. Cochran on the front steps with their 3 children, 3 girls. And then out by the street are Bessie Cochran's parents, the Roses, who had also moved to town with them. Once they were in the home in 1894 and 1896, they had 2 boys. So that ultimately by 1900, there were 9 family members living in the house itself. The Cochrans lived in the home for over 60 years until the final member of the family living in the home, Frankie Cochran Hill, sold the house in 1958 to turn it into a museum. Our collection, and I know I'm trying to keep an eye on the time. I'll speed through this part because the best way to see us is actually to come see us. So hopefully this is just a taste that'll get you out to the museum. Our collection originally was intended to just give a sense of different periods of time and different types of aesthetic and decorative art styles. The dining room is circa 1800 English, but it is set to be reminiscent of what the home would have looked like while the Neills were living there. And in fact, the entire first floor is reflective of the Neill time period. Upstairs, we move into the Cochran time period, and we have been given substantial gifts from different members of the Cochran family of family furnishings. And so when you're upstairs, you get a real sense of the way the Cochrans lived in the late 1890s, very early 1900s. This is the master bedroom. And this is the girls' room. The 3 Cochran girls went to the University of Texas. The youngest graduated in 1913, and all 3 girls lived at home while they were at the university, while young men traveled to Austin frequently for college. Young women, many of them, actually came from the Austin community rather than from elsewhere. Some young women, of course, did travel to UT and lived in boarding houses, but many young women who were from Austin and lived with family, or they would actually come and live with distant relatives while they were in school. So this room is set up to be reminiscent of what it was like while the girls were going through college. And that is an image of the 1913 yearbook showing Frankie Cochran's yearbook picture. And this was her desk when she was living in the home. She actually ended up marrying a man who was both shot and gassed during World War I. And over time, it became increasingly difficult for him to work. And so they moved back into the family home, and she ran the home for her mother during her mother's later years. So that is, as I say, a very brief history of the Neill-Cochran house site. What I could not mention today, that we were actually in the last week of a really important show that has been on view since January called If These Walls Could Talk. I failed somehow to put a slide in this presentation of the only secondary structure that's still standing on our site. It's called a dependency. All secondary structures kind of generically are dependencies. Ours was originally a slave quarters and living and workspace. And the show that we've had up this year is a collaboration between the museum, porcelain artist Ginger Geyer, who you see there on the left, and actor and storyteller Jennifer Cumberbatch. And this show has taken our site history and connected that history to the history of Austin, of Texas, and of the United States, and in an effort to really draw attention to issues of racial injustice over time, and our need to focus as we move forward on stories of redemption and ways in which we can look productively at our past to make better decisions moving forward. It actually started out, the show started out as a retrospective of Ginger's career, and she's been working for 30 years producing trompe-l'oeil porcelain pieces for a fictional alter ego named Clora. And you see Clora's silhouette on the left. And what ended up happening was Ginger got really interested in our slave quarter structure and brought Jennifer to the conversation. Jennifer invented for herself an alter ego named Ruby Virginia. And you see our site through those girls' eyes and understand kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly as you're moving through it. You're seeing 3 installations here. The one that they're holding is called Topsy Turvy, and it's really become the symbol for the show. It's a doll, rag doll, that has 2 figures joined at the waist, so there are no legs on either side. It's the upper body, torso of a black servant figure and a white sort of plantation owner's child. And these dolls were common on plantations. I actually had one when I was a child that we picked up at some historic site, and I never really liked the doll. I mean, I tossed it in a bin and really didn't want to look at it. I always found it very uncomfortable. Felt racist to me. But the reality of it is that in many cases, young Black enslaved girls were not supposed to play with objects that looked like themselves. And so these dolls became a object of subversion. So because you could turn the skirt one direction and see one thing, and turn the skirt the other direction and see something else. And so it allowed them to be playing with a doll that looked like them. But then if someone from the outside came down to their living space, they could quickly flip the skirt and it looked like they were playing with a little white girl who, of course, was going to be their charge as they got older. And what's interesting about this doll is Jen talks a lot about intersectionality and the fact that really we're all connected, and you know, we need one another. We do not exist in separate realms. And so this doll is really about the power of those connections and the fact that we need to work together if we're going to chart a better path forward. Ginger produced the installation, the bottom left, which is called Sharing Slices, specifically for the show. And it's a series of 7 different slices of pie. They're all different types: cherry, chocolate, lemon meringue, pumpkin, key lime, apple, and pecan, I think. And the point here is twofold. One, you know, what do you do with pie? You share it. It's all about community. But beyond that, with all of these different types of pie, what you're really seeing is that we're all diverse. We all have our own individuality. We might not all like the same thing. We have different tastes and preferences, but we all belong to one larger group, which is to be American. And what American doesn't like pie? Everybody likes pie, just not everybody likes the same pie. You know, my daughter has a weird aversion to cooked fruit, but she would certainly eat a chocolate pie. And so this is really kind of a playful way at getting at a really deep issue, which is, who are we and how is it that we can bridge the divides and bridge the things that separate us by focusing on commonalities. It's just, I think I may be saddest next week when the pie goes away. That's going to be my least favorite part of the deinstallation. And then on the right, this is just an absolutely gorgeous installation called Horror Vacui, and it's an old school vacuum cleaner. intricately painted. I mean, just really utterly stunning. It's in our French parlor, which is a very fancy space. And so placing the vacuum cleaner in the fancy space is a nod to all of the work that then and now goes into making a place like this function. And work is something that often we try to just sort of tuck to the side and ignore. So this is putting it, literally out in front of you in the world for everyone to see. I bring this up because, as I say, this is the last week for this show. I know everybody has a different threshold of comfort during COVID. We've got all safety precautions engaged at the museum. You must wear a mask all times on site. And we've got touchless ticketing. I mean, we've done everything we possibly can. We're staggering visitors. And so if you are interested in getting out, I highly encourage you to come out this week because the show is powerful and really quite meaningful. However, if we don't see you this week, we certainly hope to see you in the future and perhaps see you post-COVID, whenever that might be. I'm going to stop my screen share and I'm more than happy to answer any questions. I fully recognize that I kind of blew through a whole lot of material. And so please call me out on the things I got wrong and ask me about what didn't make sense.
Hi, I just wanted to say my 23-year-old grandson and I went there probably, I don't know, maybe a month or so ago. And we both really, really enjoyed it. I found it totally fascinating.
Oh, thank you. I really appreciate that.
Any other questions?
Yes, could we go back to, I'm sorry, I know we're not up on the screen. I may have interrupted someone. This is Gaylord Armstrong, but we could go back to your early maps of Austin, and found it was so helpful that you incorporated so much of the history of Austin in your presentation, but and the fascinating work done by Abner Cook on not just the Neill-Cochran house, but Woodlawn, that is better known as the Pease Mansion now, and Sweetbrush, and as well as the Capitol. But in your early depiction of the overview map, it doesn't seem like there's, as you pointed out, any structures or anything around the Neill-Cochran house. Was it not such as Woodlawn, a mansion for a marvelous farm covering what's known as Pemberton Heights and part of Tarrytown now? Was it not part of a farm? Was it just there by itself, or what was
Sure.
There it sits, and typically you would have thought that was actually part of the wonderful home for a large farm.
Right. So two things. One that I just find endlessly fascinating. There's no Woodlawn. This 1887 map, Woodlawn should be here. Can you all see the cursor? So Woodlawn should be, so if this is us, just thinking rationally, if that's us, you're seeing 24th Street. 24th Street, becomes Windsor, and it crosses Shoal Creek kind of here. And then you turn, Woodlawn would be right around there. Now, for one thing, this map makes the Shoal Creek watershed look like the Cumberland Gap or something. It seems far more impressive of a hillside than it actually is. But in any case, Woodlawn isn't even included here. And certainly there are no fields. I mean, there's nothing there from that standpoint. My understanding is that when Woodlawn was a functioning farm, where Mopac is today, they grew corn. So there were fields out over here, and you see none of that, nothing to the west. In the case of our site, I mean, it's, in fact, I think, let me exit out of this. Give me 1 second. There is a really fabulous, sorry, you're staring at my email, 1887 words map. Wikipedia has this fabulous map that actually you can click on, and then it does that. Isn't that wonderful? So yeah, look at us. There's not even a front garden path. There's nothing. This is the building that is the Fontaine building that I was telling you about. So you can see it's the only two-story building in the Wheatville neighborhood. But so our site was originally 17 acres. It went down towards Shoal Creek, but not all the way to Shoal Creek. Went up to what was Magnolia. It's 21st Street. And then it went east to Rio Grande Street and up to 24th. So it was a decent piece of property. It was not large enough for what you would call a kind of a commercial operation, which is why the term plantation tends to be connected to commercial operations. I mean, there were plantations, for instance, in Hawaii, the pineapple plantations. But this certainly was intended to be a suburban estate. It would have been a place where they would have grown really everything that they needed from a crop standpoint on site. It was much harder. There was no grocery store. So, you know, having that much land would have given, and they had a barn, they had a kitchen, there was the necessary, the outhouse, the two-story slave quarters building. I mean, all of those things were in existence then, and none of them were actually put into the bird's eye map, which I think is really kind of fascinating. Does that answer your question? I'm happy to go.
Yes. Oh, that's great. Yeah.
If you want to play, if you want to play with this, it's a really fun map to blow up, and get a sense of. So here's the Driscoll Hotel that had recently been built. And this is the brand new Congress Bridge that had just been completed.
Before it was washed away.
Right. Well, in if you look at the 1873 map, which if I can find it, 1873 bird's eye view. Which, by the way, was oriented the opposite direction. So we weren't really talking maps today, so I didn't really talk about this much, but what ended up happening was with the establishment of the University of Texas, because they built on the west side of their property, private ownership, land ownership only existed on the west side of the university up close to Old Main, not on the east side. And so it was after establishing UT that development starts to push to the west of the university and causes kind of a complete reorientation in terms of the way the city began to develop. It moved far more west than it did east. So this 1873 map, you have this orientation that really opens out to the eastern Blackland Prairie, whereas by 1887, the orientation of the city is shifted and is moving west. But what I love about this map is if you look down here, this was the bridge over Brazos. It's a pontoon bridge, which is just fantastic. And then over here, so you've got a guy with a barge, and people did bring, so the wood that was used to build most of Austin came from Bastrop, and much of it was barged up the Colorado River. And then if you go over here, you have wagons crossing the Colorado River at the mouth of Shoal Creek, which of course, is alien to us today because of the way in which the river was dammed up and turned into a lake. But I love these maps.
Yes, well, I can see, I think we're all appreciating maps even more now with your description and you're pointing out more detail. But Dr. Dasch, the time is catching up with us. And so I apologize for that. Would you have time to stay? We're going to adjourn our meeting, but would you have time to stay a few minutes in case there were additional questions, please?
Yeah, of course, I'd be happy to.
All right. Well, if you'll excuse us just for a moment, I'm going to get back to the agenda. But thank you so much for a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful presentation and for your invitation to the program that you have on exhibit this week.
Thank you.
All right, well, our thanks to Dr. Dasch, and let me get back to the agenda. We have no program next week being Thanksgiving, and but we do have a program in 2 weeks on December the 3rd. And Mac, I believe you will have that program. Is that correct? Mac Ragsdale? I'm sorry.
That's Patty again, believe it
That's
or
me
not.
again.
Got 2 in a row.
Oh, okay. Okay, Patty.
Dr. Karen Pope has agreed to come and talk to us about the Crystal Palace, I believe. So.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you so much. There was a question on the chat about what I had mentioned the holiday party, and the question was, what time is the holiday party? I mentioned that it was 2 hours. Well, the 2 hours are from 12 o'clock noon to 2 o'clock. So I think someone did respond to that on the chat. So thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. And so with this, it's time to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving, safe, and be well during Thanksgiving. And oh, I see Leonor. I'm sorry I had not acknowledged you. Leonor is joining us from somewhere out of the country. And so we're happy that you were able to join us, as well as everyone else that joined us. So with this, let me say this meeting is adjourned. For those that want to ask questions to Dr. Dasch, has graciously consented to stay a little bit longer. So you go ahead and raise your hand, and Dr. Dasch will address that. I believe, yeah.
Say that Karen Pope is the head of my board chair. She's the chair of my board. And I'm sure many of you know her and have heard her speak. She's an absolutely fabulous speaker, as well as invaluable to me.
Yeah. John, I see your hand up, and then Susie. John?
I think you're muted.
Yeah, can you unmute yourself, John, please? Yeah, John, I'm sorry, we cannot hear you.
Sorry, I did not have my hand up.
No, it's another John. I can't remember his last name.
John Brewster.
Thank you, John.
Okay.
We can hear you now. Go ahead.
Okay. Back in the 60s, when I was in school in Austin, I toured the house home. And I just wondered, I have no idea when that was built. It was for sale then and pretty falling apart, but it was quite an elegant home, many, many square feet. And I just wondered if you have any information about that.
You know, I believe at some point I learned that it was built in the 1880s.
Okay.
But don't quote me.
Some house that.
A good long.
John's.
The house home. Yeah, you know, House Park, the man who for whom House Park was named. Yeah, I believe it was built in the 1880s. There's really not much left in the city of Austin that dates to before the Civil War. There are, you know, maybe 20 buildings date before the Civil War in the city of Austin. We were such a small town. There were only 6,000 residents of Austin at the outbreak of the Civil War, 2,000 of them enslaved. And so I believe that house dates from the I'm sorry, I don't actually know much about it, but it's probably about 2 decades younger, 2-3 decades younger.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Go ahead, Susie.
I just wanted to say that last Saturday, we were at the Neill-Cochran house for a Beethoven concert.
Oh, I'm so glad you came out for that.
we really enjoyed it, and it was a great time. And we got some tickets to come tour the house, which I hope to do pretty soon.
Oh, excellent. Well, we'll look forward to seeing you back. As I say, this particular show closes at the end of this week. But over in December, we'll be decorated for the holidays. We have a
Right.
19th century, late 19th, early 20th century collection of ornaments that we put up every year. And so that's another good time to come see us. But I thought that what Beethoven did was fantastic. I thought their social distancing protocols were spot on. It was safe, and it was just lovely to be outside listening to music.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Roberto, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. Can you tell me how you see the difference? You're talking about reconciliation, right?
Yep.
And how you see the difference between the young people right now, the people between the ages of 18 to 25 versus our older people. How do they see this reconciliation going forward?
Well, it's a really interesting question. And it's hard to answer without typing people in a way that, we always want to create categories. When it comes to the people who have engaged with this particular project, kind of our natural demographic at the museum historically has been older. I think that's probably not a big surprise. The historic heritage tourism industry tends to skew older. And a lot of the people who come to visit us who are older have really taken a deep dive into literature, are reading a lot, are thinking a lot. St. David's is doing some great work, St. David's Episcopal Church. They've got a group that they're calling the Beloved Community that's really about taking this. So there's a lot of thoughtfulness. I would also say that there's a historical perspective among our older visitors. The kind of one of the most powerful things that happened attached to this show was early on, a man came and took a tour, and he lives in New Hampshire, but he grew up in Austin, and his father was on the law faculty at UT. And his father was the one who invited Martin Luther King Jr. to come speak at UT in the early 1960s. And the reason he was invited, and he was actually, apparently, this was the first time a Black man was ever invited by the university to come speak. There had been people who came down and spoke around and about Austin, but this was an official invitation. And the reason he was here was because Black students were trying to integrate the dorms at UT at the time. And this man who came in for the visit was 13 years old and was in the room when Dr. King met with these students. And this is a very long-winded story, but he just said that it was so powerful to him to come back to Austin. And also he was Jewish, this man who was visiting. And he said, when I was growing up in Austin, no one would have taken on a topic like this, and certainly no place that looks like you. In other words, this antebellum mansion. And so he was able to provide some real historic perspective about the way the city has changed. And so a lot of our older visitors are really kind of reckoning with their own past and their own understanding of history. The younger ones, in contrast,
She could talk forever.
yeah, I'm sorry. I'll keep talking. I talk too much. The younger ones are, they're reading a little bit less, but their friendships tend to be more diverse, and young people just tend to be walking in with their eyes wide open, hoping for change. Which is different. I feel like older people are kind of actively diving in to do the work, whereas younger people who have grown up in a world that has been more diverse are kind of wondering why we're not already there yet.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just one more question. We do have a board meeting coming up in about 5-10 minutes. So maybe one or two more questions.
We have Gaylord again. Go ahead, Gaylord. Unmute yourself, please. We can't hear you. You're still muted.
I apologize. Just quickly, the role of Abner Cook and its effect on the real beauty of Austin with those 4 structures, including what I call the old Freedman's Barbecue building, where I did used to eat barbecue, but it's incredible. And I wondered, for over several decades, lived across the street from the Shivers Mansion, interestingly dated Sissy Shivers. And I'll tell you, getting to know that old grand house, that is the Peace Mansion, was something. But we even looked at buying Sweetbrush years ago, but it was impractical, just a small, narrow house for a family, and spent half a century working in the Capitol. But is there one work, Dr. Dasch, on those 4 marvelous or 5 marvelous buildings, all by Abner Cook, for us history nuts that would love to have in one place the history that you've shared with us about the Neill-Cochran house, but as well the Capitol, Sweetbrush, and Woodlawn?
Yes. So Dr. Kenneth Haferteep wrote a book called Abner Cook, Master Builder on the Texas Frontier. It's what I call the Abner Cook Bible. It is a fabulous book about Austin's growth seen through the eyes of the work of Abner Cook.
The name again, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's called Abner Cook, Master Builder on the Texas Frontier.
Okay.
And it's by a man named Kenneth Haferteep.
Caperton?
Haferteep, Hafertepe.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
I think that's about it on questions. Anybody?
I'll just make a comment. I was thinking, Rowena,
Uh-huh.
you need to get on the show for Amanpour and Company's show, the KLRU. Get on that show and then give that 15-minute presentation.
I'd love to.
Of the program that you have. That'd be excellent.
Oh, well, thank you. I would love to do that.
Make it happen.
Okay.
I think that's all on questions. Dr. Rowena, thank you so much for being with us today. It was a wonderful presentation and lots of questions as well. And thank you for staying a little bit longer. Come and visit us when we are visiting, when we're getting face to face.
I'd love to do that. We were supposed to do this in person, and it got
we were
a couple of times. And I'm sorry. I mean, I just don't think any of us know when COVID ends, but we will look forward to seeing you. And I would be more than happy to come talk about something else with you guys at a later date.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah, Dr. Dasch, before you get away, just last night, the Austin History Museum and Center did a history review of Austin. Were you by chance part of that?
I was not. I was supposed to be on it, but we've got the finale for this big show. This exhibit is tonight. We're doing a performance, and I was at the rehearsal, and so I ended up missing it. But I'm hoping I'm going to be able to watch it later. But I know all those guys, and they're doing great work.
Yes, the Fontaine name that you mentioned was also very prominently mentioned last night. But anyway, thank you so much for today.
Yeah, thank you. Enjoy the rest of your afternoons.
Thanks for taking time.